The destroyer HMS Campbellton, formerly USS Buchanan, explodes at St. Nazaire on March 28, 1942. The ship, packed with 4¼ tons of delayed action explosives, detonates, while German personnel inspect the wreck grounded against Normandy dock caisson. The explosion destroys the dry dock and kills approximately 360 German soldiers and French collaborators. The mission, Operation Chariot, represents ultimate fate for one of 50 American destroyers transferred to Royal Navy in September 1940, under Destroyers for Bases Agreement. The transfer, brokered between President Franklin Roosevelt and Prime Minister Winston Churchill, exchanges 50 obsolete American flush-deck destroyers for 99-year leases on British bases in Western Hemisphere. The destroyers, built during World War I and mothballed through 1920s and 30s, are obsolete by 1940 standards, but represent critical reinforcement for Royal Navy facing destroyer shortage after losses at Dunkirk and Norway. The 50 ships, redesignated Town Class after American cities and communities, will serve throughout World War II in roles including convoy escort, anti-submarine patrol, and special operations. The ships are old, slow, mechanically unreliable, and inferior to modern destroyers. But availability matters more than capability when Royal Navy is stretched beyond limits defending Atlantic convoys, Mediterranean operations, and home waters simultaneously. The strategic context in summer 1940 explains the transfer. Germany conquers France in June, gaining Atlantic ports from which submarines and surface raiders can operate against British shipping. Italy enters war on German side, threatening Mediterranean. Royal Navy faces simultaneous commitments protecting convoys, containing Italian fleet, supporting operations in Norway, defending British home waters, and maintaining presence in Far East. The commitments exceed available forces. The destroyer losses in Norway and Dunkirk evacuations create critical shortage. Royal Navy enters Battle of Britain and Battle of the Atlantic with insufficient destroyers to meet minimum requirements for convoy escort and anti-submarine operations. Prime Minister Churchill appeals to President Roosevelt in May 1940, requesting loan or sale of destroyers. Churchill's message emphasizes that Britain stands alone against Germany, and that losing Atlantic battle would force British surrender regardless of will to resist. The message calculates that if Germany achieves naval superiority in Atlantic, cutting British supply lines from America and colonies, Britain cannot sustain war effort. The destroyers, even obsolete ones, would provide minimum force necessary to maintain convoy protection while modern destroyers are built. Roosevelt faces legal and political obstacles to providing military assistance. American neutrality laws prohibit selling or transferring military equipment to belligerent nations. American public opinion, influenced by isolationist sentiment, opposes involvement in European war. Congress, controlled by coalitions skeptical of foreign entanglements, would resist legislation authorizing destroyer transfer. But Roosevelt recognizes that British defeat would leave Germany dominant in Europe and would threaten American security. The challenge is finding legal mechanism to provide destroyers without violating neutrality laws or requiring congressional approval, certain to fail. The solution is exchange rather than sale. Roosevelt's legal advisors determined that trading destroyers for base leases constitutes defense arrangement benefiting United States rather than assistance to belligerent. The bases, located in Newfoundland, Bermuda, Bahamas, Jamaica, St. Lucia, Trinidad, Antigua, and British Guiana, provide strategic positions for defending Western Hemisphere approaches. The leases, extending 99 years, give United States permanent rights to establish military installations. The arrangement is structured as quid pro quo exchange rather than gift or sale to belligerent, avoiding neutrality law violations. The political justification presents exchange as strengthening American defense rather than aiding Britain. Roosevelt emphasizes base access enables United States to detect and intercept threats approaching hemisphere. The Caribbean and Atlantic bases create defense in depth, protecting approaches to Panama Canal and American East Coast. The destroyers, described as surplus to American needs, and obsolete, are portrayed as minimal sacrifice for substantial defensive improvement. The framing allows Roosevelt to proceed without congressional approval, while claiming action serves American interests rather than supporting Britain. The 50 destroyers selected for transfer belonged to Wicks and Clemson classes built during 1917 through 1921. These flush-deck four-stack destroyers represent World War I design featuring 4 funnels, flush main deck running full length, an armament of 4 4-inch guns plus torpedo tubes. The design, adequate for World War I, is obsolete by 1940 standards. Modern destroyers feature 5-inch dual-purpose guns, sophisticated fire control, higher speed, and improved seakeeping. The flush-deckers have inferior armament, minimal anti-aircraft capability, poor seakeeping in heavy weather, and mechanical systems showing decades of wear. The material condition varies. Some destroyers have been maintained in reserve fleet, with preservation measures protecting machinery and structure. Others have deteriorated from years of minimal maintenance in backwater anchorages. All require work before becoming operational. The transfer agreement includes American commitment to make ships minimally operational before delivery, but does not include extensive refits. British crews must accept ships essentially as found and conduct needed repairs after taking possession. The first 8 destroyers transferred to Royal Navy on September 6, 1940, at Halifax, Nova Scotia. British crews board American ships. American crews disembark, and Union Jack replaces Stars and Stripes. The ceremony is brief, reflecting urgency and practical focus on getting ships into service. Additional transfers occur through September and October until all 50 ships change hands. The redesignation follows alphabetical pattern using English town names. HMS Belmont, ex-USS Satterley. HMS Beverly, ex-USS Branch. HMS Bradford, ex-USS McClanahan. Continuing through alphabet to HMS Roxborough, ex-USS Foote. The British assessment upon taking possession ranges from resigned acceptance to dismay. The ships are clearly obsolete. The machinery is worn. The accommodations are inferior to British standard. The 4-stack configuration creates topside weight affecting stability. The flush deck design ships water in moderate seas, but beggars cannot be choosers, and Royal Navy needs hulls regardless of condition. The acceptance reports note deficiencies, but acknowledge ships can perform convoy escort and anti-submarine patrol with work. The refitting occurs at British shipyards through late 1940 and early 1941. The modifications include removing 2 of 4 funnels to reduce topside weight and improve stability, removing half the torpedo tubes to make space for depth charge racks and throwers, installing British sonar sets, replacing American sound equipment, adding radar when available, improving anti-aircraft armament with additional machine guns, and eventually Oerlikon 20mm cannon. And the refits consume months per ship, but produce vessels capable of operational service. The operational debut occurs in convoy escort duty beginning winter 1940-41. The ships join Western Approaches Command, protecting convoys between America and Britain. The assignment capitalizes on destroyers' endurance and seakeeping, while avoiding situations requiring speed and armament where obsolescence would be critical weakness. Convoy escort involves steaming at convoy speed, approximately 8 to 10 knots, conducting anti-submarine patrols around convoy perimeter, and attacking U-boats detected by sonar or sighted on surface. The role does not require 30-knot speed or sophisticated gunnery, making flush-deckers adequate despite obsolescence. The performance in convoy escort is mixed. The ships successfully escort numerous convoys without losses. The presence of destroyers deters U-boat surface attacks and enables counterattacks against submarines making approaches. But engine failures are common. Boiler casualties force ships to leave convoys and proceed independently to ports for repairs. The maintenance requirements strain British shipyards, already overloaded with repairing battle-damaged ships. The flush-deckers consume maintenance capacity disproportionate to capability provided. The seakeeping proves problematic. The flush deck design, adequate for relatively calm waters, behaves poorly in North Atlantic winter conditions. Waves sweep decks, damaging equipment and injuring crew. Rolling and pitching affect crew effectiveness and make weapons operation difficult. Several ships suffer structural damage from heavy weather, requiring extensive repairs. The experience confirms what British officers suspected. The ships are unsuited for North Atlantic winter operations, but necessity requires using them regardless. The anti-submarine capabilities are limited. The sonar sets, even after British upgrades, are less capable than equipment on modern destroyers. The depth charge capacity is adequate, but depth charge throwers are older design with limited range. The ships can attack detected submarines, but detection range is inferior to modern vessels. The combination means flush deck destroyers can protect convoys from submarines that approach close enough to be detected, but cannot provide extended detection range modern equipment enables. The casualties among town-class destroyers reflect hazards of North Atlantic operations. HMS Broadwater is torpedoed and sunk by U-boat on October 19, 1941. HMS Stanley is torpedoed and sunk on December 19, 1941. HMS Belmont is torpedoed on January 31, 1942. The losses continue through war, with 15 of 50 ships lost to enemy action. Marine casualties, or operational accidents. The 30% loss rate exceeds rates for modern destroyers, reflecting combination of obsolescent design, mechanical unreliability, and employment in dangerous roles. The successes are also documented. HMS Broadway participates in capture of U-boat U-110 on May 9, 1941, recovering cryptographic materials, including Enigma machine, that contribute to ultra-intelligence. The capture provides critical intelligence advantage, enabling convoy routing to avoid U-boat concentrations. HMS Lewis sinks U-boat U-206 on November 22, 1941, demonstrating that old destroyers can achieve kills when opportunity arises. Multiple ships successfully defend convoys, driving off U-boat attacks and preventing merchant ship losses. The special operations role emerges as alternative employment for ships unsuitable for routine escort duty. The most famous is HMS Campbelltown's use in St. Nazaire raid. The ship, too old and unreliable for Atlantic escort, is selected for suicide mission because loss is acceptable, and configuration allows packing with explosives. The successful mission, destroying only dry dock on Atlantic coast, capable of servicing German battleship Tirpitz, demonstrates that obsolete ships can provide unique capabilities when employed creatively. Other special operations include HMS Leamington, serving as convoy rescue ship, recovering survivors from torpedoed merchants. HMS Mansfield serves as training ship for anti-submarine schools. HMS Clare operates as headquarters ship for minor naval forces. The variety of secondary roles demonstrates that even obsolete ships provide utility when employed appropriately, rather than attempting missions requiring modern capabilities. The crew experiences on town-class destroyers emphasize hardship and making do with inadequate equipment. British sailors, accustomed to modern destroyers with better accommodations and reliability, find flush deckers primitive and uncomfortable. The American-designed crew spaces are cramped even by destroyer standards. The galleys are inadequate for British meal preferences. The heads, toilet facilities, are insufficient for crew size. The heating is inadequate for North Atlantic conditions. The crew endures these conditions because ships are needed, and complaining achieves nothing. Lieutenant Robert Atkinson, serving on HMS Broadway, describes conditions. The ship was wet. Waves came over the bow continuously in moderate seas. Everything was damp. Mold grew in spaces that should have been dry. The crew was constantly cold and wet. The machinery broke down regularly. We spent as much time repairing as operating, but the ship kept going. The American construction was solid, even if obsolete. When everything worked, we could do the job. The problem was that everything rarely worked simultaneously. The American perspective on the transfer combined satisfaction at helping Britain with recognition that ships provided were marginal capability. American naval officers understood the destroyers were obsolete and unsuitable for modern combat, but the alternative was not providing assistance and risking British defeat. The calculation was that 50 obsolete destroyers were expendable from American perspective. while being essential from British perspective. The mismatch between American surplus and British desperation created conditions where transfer made strategic sense despite ships' limitations. The political consequences of the agreement extend beyond immediate destroyer transfer. The deal establishes precedent for American material support to Britain while technically maintaining neutrality. The Lend-Lease program, enacted in March 1941, builds on destroyers for bases model by providing weapons and supplies to Britain without requiring immediate payment. The progression from base exchange to Lend-Lease to eventual American entry into war demonstrates how initial, limited commitment evolves into full partnership. The base leases acquired through exchange prove valuable for American defense. The bases established in Newfoundland, Bermuda, Caribbean, and South America provide forward positions for air and naval patrols protecting Atlantic approaches. The bases enable convoy escort operations, anti-submarine patrols, and air transport routes that would be impossible without forward staging points. The 99-year leases, essentially permanent access, provide enduring American presence in British territories, strengthening strategic position throughout Cold War. The strategic assessment evaluates whether destroyers significantly affected Battle of Atlantic outcome. The consensus is that ships provided marginal but important contribution during critical period. The 50 destroyers did not decisively change Atlantic battle, but helped sustain convoy protection during winter 1940-41. When Royal Navy was stretched desperately thin. The ships bridged gap between Dunkirk losses and delivery of new construction destroyers in 1942 and 43. Without the 50 ships, some convoys would have sailed with inadequate escort or not sailed at all, potentially affecting supplies reaching Britain. The comparison to alternative uses of 50 destroyers in American service suggests ships had minimal value to United States Navy. American destroyer construction programs were producing modern vessels in numbers exceeding immediate needs. The flush-deck destroyers were surplus to requirements and deteriorating in reserve. Scrapping was probable fate if not transferred. The transfer therefore cost United States ships that would otherwise be scrapped, while providing Britain ships, however obsolete, could perform missions. The exchange benefited Britain enormously, while costing America essentially nothing in military capability. The symbolic importance exceeds material contribution. The destroyer transfer demonstrates American willingness to support Britain when outcome was uncertain and American entry into war was not assured. The gesture provides moral support during Britain's isolation and suggests America will not allow British defeat, even if not yet ready for direct military involvement. The symbolism strengthens British morale and signals to Germany that America, while neutral, favors Allied cause. The post-war disposition sees surviving town-class destroyers quickly retired. By 1945, the ships are beyond economical repair and obsolete by any standard. Most are scrapped immediately after war ends. A few survive in subsidiary roles until late 40s before scrapping. None are preserved as museum ships, reflecting that old destroyers transferred as stopgap measure have no constituency for preservation. Unlike famous warships with distinguished records, the legacy is political and symbolic rather than military. The destroyer transfer established principle of American support for Britain, set precedent for Lend-Lease, provided model for base access agreements, and demonstrated that creative legal arrangements can circumvent political obstacles to necessary action. The military contribution, while real, was secondary to political significance of America, providing tangible support during Britain's desperate hour. The assessment by historians generally views transfer as successful despite ships' limitations. Churchill describes destroyers as timely help in the Battle of the Atlantic. Roosevelt's biographers cite Deal as example of presidential leadership navigating between isolationist constraints and strategic necessity. Naval historians note ships' marginal military value, but acknowledge importance during specific period when any destroyers, however obsolete, provided needed capability. The 50 old men, obsolete ships transferred as emergency measure, served their purpose by filling gap during desperate time. The ships were inadequate by modern standards, but adequate for minimum requirements. The crews made do with limitations. performing missions despite mechanical problems and design obsolescence. The destroyers bridged period between disaster and recovery, providing just enough capability just when needed most. The transfer cost America little and benefited Britain substantially, creating strategic value disproportionate to ships' inherent worth. That asymmetry, providing marginal American surplus to fill critical British need, represents essence of successful alliance, where partners' different circumstances create opportunities for mutually beneficial exchanges. The 50 destroyers, individually insignificant, collectively mattered by sustaining convoy protection, enabling Britain to continue fighting. The old men performed until modern replacements arrived, then quietly departed, having served purpose for which they were never designed, but which circumstances required and which they adequately fulfilled.